Hi, welcome to Playing Seriously or Jugando en Serio. I'm Sonia Gonzalez, Global Expansion Manager at Game Strategies, and today we are going to talk about artificial intelligence and how this is transforming corporate training and how the employees are learning by now. So for this, we have a very special guest. He's Ashwin Mehta, founder and director of Mehtadology. He's an expert with over 12 years of experience in training corporations and helping them through emerging technologies and artificial intelligence. Welcome, Ashwin. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here because we are going to have such a nice conversation, I hope. I really want to start with your background. So what led you start working in corporations and specializing in artificial intelligence and also emerging technologies?
Yeah, so I started down this road of digital learning maybe around 2012. And I was working in different countries in sub-Saharan Africa at the time. And the technology landscape was very different there because in some places you didn't have stable power or broadband connectivity. Maybe you didn't have devices. So we were doing some projects and we were putting all of these things in as the foundation for digital learning. And it kind of made me realize that there's a big wide world of technology out there. It's not just about e-learning on a screen. It's about the entire infrastructure that needs to go in to make learning successful, digital learning successful. And I did a PhD in human-computer interactions with the technology. So I was looking at technology adoption and what drives intention to either reject or continue or to accept any of these kinds of technologies. And I was looking at structural equation modeling, statistical modeling, and all the different types of things that I could do with that. And I started looking at things like machine learning. I started looking at neural networks. The thing that I did with my PhD was to develop a statistical model for how people interact with that kind of technology, how they form that intention, how that intention leads to behavior. But that started me on this journey. And I was looking at statistics and data science, and I was looking at all of these things. And over a period of time, I was in consulting as well as part of a Big Four consulting firm. And I had the chance to look at digital twins, Internet of Things, blockchain, a whole wide variety of things. So I was looking at technology and how it is applied to human capital management, whether that's learning or whether it's other things as well. And artificial intelligence, when that came along, and I don't mean when it came along because it's been around for decades, when generative AI came along and ChatGPT came out and took the world by storm, started this disruption. I'd already been doing a lot of this kind of thing for quite a number of years. And for me, it wasn't, although there was disruption, it wasn't new because we were always looking at emerging technologies. And I always found this very interesting. So, of course, we have another emerging technology. We have another set of disruptions. Speed is different. The speed of disruption and the scale of disruption is different. But fundamentally, we're talking about the application of technology in companies for strategic benefit, for competitive advantage, for value generation, and how it impacts people. So it's kind of the thing that I've been doing all along. So why wouldn't I go for it? Because it's a very interesting field and it's exciting times.
It is actually. So studies have reflected that in the last 2 years, artificial intelligence has increased about 30% in education. So I really want to know your point on how do you think this growth is actually affecting and impacting corporations at the moment, specifically in the learning field?
So let's just break that down a little bit. So we have corporate learning. We've also used the word training so far. We've been talking for a few minutes, but we've used the word training. So training is a risk mitigation measure that a business will put in. They'll have risks. They'll have a risk register. They'll say some things are caused by human factors and we need to control those things. So we will do some kind of training. And the training is something that needs to be auditable. Maybe there's a regulatory driver or something like that. Sometimes it's called compliance. And you will have that kind of mechanism. And you have training departments who manage that whole process. So it's a risk management function. And there is space for artificial intelligence there because we're talking about surfacing information in a way that can be validated. So you could have retrieval augmented generation. You could have virtual assistants basically picking up information and delivering it to people based on a trigger. So that is quite a rudimentary or foundational application. And that would be mostly something that is put in by technical teams, by IT teams. So it's not necessarily something that a learning department might do, maybe, depending on the scale of the business. So when we say there is an application and the growth of the application by 30% in education, it's important to know what we're actually talking about. Because on the other end of the spectrum, you have learning and development departments, or maybe training departments, who mostly use software as a service tools, things that you find in the browser, things that you pay a license for, and those things allow you to create some kind of media. And they create that media and they package it in a particular format, and then they move it onto a particular system. So we might say we're making e-learning, we're putting it on an LMS. For you guys, you might say you're making a game and you're putting it into your campus, right? Mm-hmm. So all of these things are potential applications for artificial intelligence. And mostly we're looking at the acceleration of workflows or the automation of workflows or something like that. So it really depends on what we're talking about, because I would say agentic workflows or AI-driven workflows or automation or process automation is probably not an educational, it's probably not within this remit of education, but it's so vital and it's such a probably growth area for artificial intelligence. So why are we seeing this growth, right? We're seeing this growth because learning departments are under scrutiny. They need to justify their existences. They need to make sure that they're getting a return on investment. And mostly they're incentivized to produce batch content or look at skills or, use particular platforms. And so we're seeing that growth because really what every business wants is they want to do things either better, faster, or cheaper. And artificial intelligence allows learning departments to do that, but it also allows technical departments to do that. So I think we should just balance what's happening in the learning space with what should be happening across businesses generally.
Very interesting. Obviously, we're talking about learning because it's what we do, but you're completely right. But I'm interested in getting to know more about how you feel on traditional channels we are using, specifically in training again. And how do you think this is actually transforming right now, because in the future is another talk. But right now, how do you see any change there? Do you see that artificial intelligence already made any changes to the traditional channels that we are using in training?
Yeah, so if we just focus on this e-learning thing, and so traditional channels tend to be basically face-to-face classroom, cohort-based training or learning interventions, or maybe the creation of e-learning. Both of those, there's an impact on both of those. So when you think about the traditional sage on a stage, somebody's going to stand up in front of 30 people and talk for however long. There's going to be a PowerPoint behind them, maybe a screen, maybe some flip charts, that kind of setup. Then there is an acceleration of preparing for that lesson. So what resources do I need when I stand up in front of these people? What am I going to say? What's the script? What kind of activities do I need? How do I assess? So if you're a trainer, probably you could be using artificial intelligence in that space. But it's very dependent on the trainer. Not everybody does it. Not everybody has the skills. Not everybody has the access to the tools. So that I tend not to talk about too much because it's so variable. Mm-hmm. On the digital side, there's massive impact already. If we think about nearly every tool on the market. So I think it was October when Articulate finally got into the AI game. But Articulate has been one of the biggest companies, one of the biggest players in the e-learning development market. It's one of those tools that most L&D departments or most suppliers will use. And they came quite late to the game. So is there impact from that? Well, actually what they're doing is they've got some kind of, it's kind of similar to Notion, where you have effectively a plugin, right? You have some kind of AI generation for script, for assessments and things like that. And you can vary the language. So it's kind of like that. Is that massively impactful? I don't know, right? It allows you to do something a little bit faster, right? Is it massively more creative? Probably not. But it allows us to make the e-learning that people weren't watching anyway, weren't clicking on, unless you made them, right? This is mandatory, go and do it. But in most companies, people will go, oh, another e-learning course, right? I'm going to click, and I'm not going to do it. And then, all right, I've clicked through, I guessed my way through the multiple choice quiz, and now I'm done. I'm going to go make a coffee, and I've already forgotten what it was that course was about. It allows us to make those courses faster. Mm-hmm. So when you ask, is there impact? There's impact in terms of the speed. L&D ops Is there impact on the learner? I don't think so. So what has impact on the learner? Well, we have the democratization of tools. We can all access ChatGPT, Copilot, Claude, whatever your model of choice is. We can all access those things pretty freely and ask whatever we want and find information. And we can, ask for, give me a script on this, or tell me what I need to know about that particular document or something. You can surface that information. That's very impactful, because now we're talking about information in the flow of work. And when we start to have information in the flow of work and it's democratized across organizations, we then start to ask the question, well, we had this department that was talking about learning in the flow of work for, 10 years. Now we have learning in the flow of work, but it's been driven by technical departments. So what does this department now do? And that also is impact, because it's disruption, and it makes us question the structures that we have in place to do this kind of thing. So I think there's varying levels of impact. But is it learner impact? I don't know.
No, I know it's a very wide topic, so it's quite difficult to, But let's talk then about the employee. So when a user is using artificial intelligence, how this can help them, especially when we are talking about engagement and motivation, because this is one struggle that everybody's having in L&D, right? So let's speak about this. How can artificial intelligence could be helping in this topic? To be eager to, do their learnings, learn more, get better at their jobs.
So there are a couple of ways to take that question, right? Now, are people getting better at their jobs using artificial intelligence? Yeah, of course they are. And I'll give you a very rudimentary example.
Okay.
You have a software product, right? If you have a software product, you'll do some user engagement. Maybe you will put out a survey. Maybe you'll ask a few people to come on a call and tell me what's great about this software and what would you want to change, right? So that gives us the concept of like a features roadmap or something like that. So that's a very rudimentary thing. And most companies that have products, have software products, so you want to do some kind of user engagement. If you're working in that, right, how do you get better at your job? Well, you can do your interview and then write down everything that was said and, make some notes, and then try and categorize these things into, a lot of people have problems with like the user experience or like a user interface. Some people really want to see better analytics and, they want to see dashboarding. And then you go, right, I'm going to make my software better. We've all done that, right? But now you have, well, let's get everybody on a meeting. Let's transcribe it. Let's put the transcript into something like Copilot or some kind of secure large language model capability that you might have, whichever one you use in your company. Let's put it in there. Let's pull out immediately everything that was a feature request, everything that was a problem, and everything that was some kind of neutral statement. Let's partition that. Let's get some statistics on that. Let's do all of that at the click of a button. I've already gotten better at my job. I'm more efficient at my job. I'm learning how to use AI. I'm learning probably how to use things like spreadsheets as I go. But none of that's what we call corporate learning. That's just learning as you go, right? You're figuring out the problems that you have as you have the problems. That's learning, because we're all learning. As we do that kind of thing, we are all learning. But how do you formalize that? How do you start to go, well, we can capture that? We can somehow, statistically or otherwise, qualitatively or quantitatively, capture that everybody who uses Excel and is using a large language model now has a higher degree of skill in doing those tasks that they were trying to do. Because that is the question that you've asked, is how do we formalize that effectively? Formalizing that's very difficult. So I think everybody who has access and who has a certain amount of skill in prompting or, using some of these models is already getting better at their jobs. They're already getting better at learning. They're already motivated to do that because they have a problem and they want to solve that problem. It's not the same as engagement in terms of learning. So let's split that. On the other side, we have, well, how do we make the learning interventions that we have to do as a company, how do we make those more effective? How do we make those more engaging? And the thing I'm questioning is, do we need those at all, right? But if we do need them, let's assume that we do need them, right? then you have the kinds of things that you guys do. So how do we make things more visually stimulating? How do we make the audio experience better? How do we make the environment of the game or the intervention itself more appealing? How do we start to build that kind of user satisfaction base, or dare I say it, NPS, where people are telling other people, and we start to build that social influence and that social capital in a construct that is fundamentally hedonically motivating. So it's not that you have to do it because you have an outcome. It's fun in itself. So these kinds of things can go towards engagement. But we kind of rely on people to tell other people about that, because you're never going to know if something's engaging and stimulating if you never clicked on it in the first place. So it's a wide and complex topic, but I think making better interventions and leaving the rudimentary basic ones behind, I think, is the way to go for engagement.
Completely agree, to be honest. But I really want to know, you are in contact with different corporations, so obviously to all these technologies. Is there any application of the artificial intelligence impress you by now? We know that we have a lot of time to see how this goes, but is there any application that you thought, wow, this is going to change this? Yeah. We're talking always about learning, right? You can talk wide, but learning specifically will be super interesting.
So I'll give you two answers to that, right? And one answer flows into the other. So the thing that's impressing me a lot at the moment is the concept of agentic workflows. And you can apply that to learning operations. You can apply that to media generation as well. So it kind of leads into those things. But I'm talking about platforms like make.com, like N8N, like potentially Power Automate also does some of this stuff if anybody's in a Microsoft environment. But we're talking about the whole-scale automation of most of our administrative lives. And that's very powerful. And if we apply that to learning, we then have the concept, well, let's say you really wanted to create some media. I'm not a fan of media creation or content at rest, generally. I think it's something we need to leave behind. But if we wanted to make content at rest, well, you could say a traditional training department who deals with subject matter experts from the business. They say, I want this e-learning piece made. And then someone goes and makes that e-learning piece, and you go back and forth, and then eventually you make something. You can automate that whole thing. And that's quite disruptive to the market, because you have suppliers out there who sell e-learning services. They say, we will make your e-learning for you. You just tell us what to do. And that tends to be the offshore kind of market. And then you have companies who sell bespoke e-learning creation services onshore as well. And say, well, we'll make you this shiny, pretty thing. If you can automate that whole thing, at the click of a button, all of your media comes out, and the L&D application of that is you have all of these kind of avatar, talking head video kind of tools. They're pretty good in terms of API connection. So you can go from conception of an idea through to something that's research scripted, and then you effectively banged out a video at the click of a button. It's disruptive, but it's impressive to me because it's something that can be not only automated, but also can have some degree of intelligence behind it, because you can have some decisions that are made without human intervention as you go. So I think that's going to be a game changer, because that would disrupt the entire L&D market, and it's already possible. So the only thing we need is for everybody to go and use it, right?
That's very interesting you say that, because we actually are going to do this. We are releasing a simulator with artificial intelligence. And basically you are talking to an avatar, and this avatar is coming back to you with your answers. And this is the interesting thing, and I think this is going to change lots of things, because you can practice as you go, and you can get the suggestions, your comments, that is going to train you live, but so realistically that when you're in real life, you will apply it 100%. I will show you later.
Yeah,
I think you're going to like it.
Sounds amazing. And
it is great.
Certainly for the, let's say, the avatar market, but an avatar can be many things. It can be, from a cartoon character all the way through to a deep fake of a realistic looking person. But in that whole market, the potential to do things like you've just described is huge.
No, and we can see it now. Like everybody's super interested in this topic because obviously everybody wants to apply artificial intelligence to everything, but I feel like not everybody knows how to do it.
Yeah.
It's so new, so we're just figuring out. We do this for living, but I will show you later. But I also want to know what you feel is still missing. A part of this, is there any other thing that you feel like we can apply this artificial intelligence, and nobody's doing it? Why? You know a lot about this kind of technology, so what's your opinion?
So the thing that I think is coming this year, I haven't seen it yet, but the thing I think is coming is the multi-agent framework kind of idea.
Okay.
So if we think about the last 2 years, basically we had this. I'll be very blasé about the whole disruptive force of generative AI right now, and we're talking about some things that are amazing technologies, really. Changing society. But let me just put that to one side and just be very blasé about this. You had something that like a text screen, you ask it something and it gives you text back, and it seems like a human being wrote that text. And that was basically the disruption a couple of years ago. And we focused on speed. And then there was a focus on accuracy. And then there was a focus on reasoning. And now we're getting to things that are increasingly sophisticated. But we're also seeing that having a general purpose thing that answers our questions doesn't always give us the best answers. So now we have focus. And when we start to look at agents, we start to say, well, this is going to be my lead generation agent. This is going to be my voice agent. This is going to be my sales agent. I have my marketing agent. All of those come under a communication agent. So the communication agent is now managing all of these others. And if you have a director agent and it starts to talk with the communication agent, it starts to divert workflows, right? So you have this concept of multi-agent frameworks. And that's going to be disruptive again, right? But that's an area where we're not currently playing. And we're not playing technically, and we're not playing in terms of L&D. And the reason I say that is that although conceptually it's there, and you can do it as a small business, of course, you can do these things. Big businesses are constrained by things like risk, things like governance, things like technical strategy, things like the technical roadmap of what's going to be implemented, and they tend to be just a little bit slower. So you have companies now that are implementing copilots where it's been around for a while. You could have just implemented it 6 months ago, a year ago, whatever. So there is a tail of implementation that companies go through. And this idea of multi-agent frameworks, so you have a hierarchy, you also have a human hierarchy. So your director talks to your director agent, your manager talks to your manager agent. It doesn't work like that, but you know what I mean? You've got this kind of concept where you could start to think, well, what does AI do really well? What do people do really well? How do we partition our tasks so that everybody's doing the thing that they do well, and we have the most efficient setup we could possibly have? Nobody's there yet. It sounds obvious when I say it, but nobody's there yet. And that's not a technical application. That's just conceptually like, how do we implement things against the purpose in a way that maximizes efficiency? And the reason most businesses are not there right now is all of this is just a little bit scary, right? So you have AI comes in and everybody goes, well, what about my job? Let's go through like some consultation. Let's think about restructuring. What's the impact on society? It's moving very quickly. So because it's moving so quickly, decisions are starting to become more slow because people are scared about all of this and what's the impact on like the entirety of my workforce. If I have 50,000 people in my company and I could do the same work now with 10,000 people, that is a huge disruption. So this concept of multi-agent and multi-person hierarchies and managing all of that stuff it's just not there yet, and it will be. But
we will get there.
I think that's going to be my answer for the most exciting thing that's missing right now.
So talking about scary things, obviously this is a very interesting topic, sorry. But although we all want to implement artificial intelligence, even though maybe we don't know how, there are some risks here. And I'm talking about ethical challenges. Specifically, I want to know your opinion on how do you feel corporations should ensure that information, because, information with artificial intelligence could sometimes not be as accurate or verified as we hope or wish. So what is your opinion on how corporations should behave on, corporations should use information that is trusted and is reliable? How do you think this should be addressed by corporations?
So internally and externally, there are two separate markets, right? So the first thing is, and it's a risk that we need to manage, but it's the kind of whole scale workforce wide concept of being able to validate and trust information. And that's very important. And that's a literacy and skills piece that learning departments can be really valuable in this space to make sure that when you're mobilizing an organization for artificial intelligence, that you have all of the skills that go with that. And the workforce is able to understand what artificial intelligence is, how that's being used to generate media, and then which sources of media can be trusted within the organization. And that you need structures around that, obviously, because you need to have certain channels that are trusted. And then to kind of foster this idea, and this is a terrible idea, but I've seen the destruction of this idea over many years. But the concept of validating everything that you see. So, very rudimentary example, if you put some text into a large language model, you get a response. There might be a reference. If you use Perplexity or anything like that, you'll get references. If you get a reference, you click on the reference and read it. And if we go back to the time when we were all at universities, right, we all had this drilled into us that you will check the references, you will read the references. And nowadays, what we have is you see something on Instagram, we go, yeah, that's probably true. And I'm just not going to look into it any further. I'm going to remember this statistic because I saw it on a reel. And so those are two very different points of view. And it's important for L&D departments and for organizations to make sure that their entire workforce is aware of risks, is aware of the risk of misinformation, but also has this habit of checking and validating everything that they see. That's the most important thing. The second is obviously the trusted channels, to make sure that you have, well, if it comes from these channels, it's been looked over by a person, it's been to the degree that it needs to be, or it's been checked by an agent against policies or whatever, and say within the organization, these are our trusted channels. If it comes from one of these, you can expect it to be true. We used to have this with email, right? You get company-wide emails go out, everybody goes, right, this is a message from our CEO or something, right? There's a new policy, this comes from our IT department. So that was a trusted channel. And so we have this concept already. So which are the trusted channels? And then the third thing is things like watermarking. So to make sure that everybody in a transparent way kind of knows that this has been generated by AI, this has been generated by a person, this has been generated by AI with a human review. All of these things are possible in a corporation. So when you're putting something out across your workforce, there are a wide variety of things you should do. It becomes a little bit more complicated when you start to communicate with the external environment. So if you're putting something out in society, you're putting something out that has a reputational impact. This is, again, where checks and balances and watermarking and all of these things come in. But the reputational damage potential is very different when you put things out externally. But I wouldn't say the approach is massively different, but we should just acknowledge that internal, external environments are slightly different.
Yeah, totally. Well, before finishing this conversation, I want to talk about we talk about the future already, but I want to know more about what would you like the future is bringing with artificial intelligence in training or corporations. Well, where is your wish? Because you're an expert here, so you will know where to the next, probably. So what, because you already said some stuff before, but what are your thoughts here?
So the thing that I want to say, I already mentioned multi-agent frameworks for 2025, which I think is amazing. I would like to see maximum automation of things that human beings don't need to do. And it's not a single application. That means that companies need to be considering their strategy and having the deployment of artificial intelligence, generative AI, agentic workflows, all of the things that I've mentioned can be deployed across a business in a way that maximizes efficiency. And that maximizes the value that can be created from the system, from machines. And that means that the role of people, of course, needs to change. So this is the thing that I think the future is going to not only look like, but I think this is the thing that we're all going to struggle with in the future. And that is, what do we do as people? What's our purpose? Because so many companies, we know this because we're in the learning industry, we know this, that we have to deal with compliance. What does compliance mean? It's a throwaway term that we all use. We have to deal with standard operating procedures, SOPs, all of these things, which again are throwaway terms for us. When you break that right down, what are we actually saying? What we're saying is we have a human being. A human being has critical thinking and judgment and can solve problems. And we're going to say, leave all of that at home. Here's a procedure. I want you to follow it as if you're a machine. And compliance means that you should never question that. That's a weird place to be as people, right? And if that's where we are, and we've been like this for decades and we've never questioned it. And now we're going, well, we have artificial intelligence. What's the role of people? The role of people should have been that stuff that we've just mentioned, the critical thinking and the judgment and all of that. But no, we made them follow things without question. We said, here, sit at this desk, click these buttons in this order. So that means that you've got a lot of people who've only done that for their whole lives. Those people are going to struggle because machines can do all of that stuff. So that's a kind of weird future, like a dystopian future where we say, well, we've got, 80% of the population that's going to be like wandering the streets, just like scratching their noses and figuring out what to do. But on the other side, you go, well, fine. And you will have seen this on LinkedIn. You will have seen this with all of my counterparts, all of the other AI people who are out there and say, the future is critical thinking and judgment and problem solving. And, part of me just thinks, well, is it right? Because what we've actually said is we've got 50 years where people haven't exercised critical thinking and problem solving, right? You get atrophy of muscles that you don't use. So now we say, all of you folks that we all told you never ever to think critically. We told you never to question. Compliance was the word of the day for everybody. And now we're going to switch that back on because machines can do everything else. So you guys all need to be expert problem solvers. And I got all these people coming in with I'm a coach, right? I'm going to coach people in solving problems. Well, that's great. You don't need any qualifications to be a coach. So fine, just everybody go off and be a coach. So you've got a bunch of people who are going to be coaches and a bunch of people who are going to solve problems that they haven't solved for 50 years. That is a crazy future. How do we manage that? And it's a societal problem. It's not a learning and development problem, but learning and development has a role to play because we need to be thinking about skills. We need to be thinking about literacy. And we also need to be thinking about how we restructure our organizations. And that used to be an HR thing, right? So you've got all of these issues which could potentially land on the table in front of the learning department. And then you have another problem, right? Because the learning department that's been told to go and make compliance e-learning for the last 20 years, saying we want you to restructure the organization to optimize for critical thinking. We want you to help the IT department to restructure the organization to optimize for machines. They don't have the skills because they've never done it, because they've been making compliance e-learning for 20 years. So that in itself is a problem. And you start to get to this issue, I think, not to be political, but I think we saw this with Brexit, that there was an issue with when the British government were negotiating and they had always outsourced all of their negotiators. So they were thinking, well, where are our negotiators? How do we pull in negotiators so we can both negotiate about this political thing? So now we're going to have problems like that. Well, where do we source the people who restructure the organization? And where do we source the people who can teach critical thinking? And how do we find the critical mass of people that need to go and solve our problems? That, I think, is a huge problem. And when you say, what do I want the future to look like? I kind of want the future to look like that is a smooth transition for everybody. But I think that's going to be a rocky road.
It looks like. Well, we're thankful that we have people like you who know a lot about all of this. So let's go for some quick questions before we finish, okay? You need to answer as fast as you can.
Lightning round.
Yes. Well, later on. First, some questions. Okay. So what skill do you think artificial intelligence makes much more rewarding to learn compared to other methods?
The skill. So the skill is going to be a technical one.
Okay.
And I mean any technical skill. So coding, for example, or manipulating databases, manipulating spreadsheets, any of these things is more rewarding because you can get results. And the moment you start to see results, you start to be motivated by those things. But the barrier to entry is now lower. So people who, I don't know if you've ever coded, but most people, when you start to code, it's a little bit tricky, right? You've got to learn a bunch of things. And, your syntax could be wrong, and, you've missed one curly bracket or one full stop or one comma, depending on which language you're using. And it doesn't work. And it's massively demotivating. And it takes a lot of time to figure it out. And now, using artificial intelligence, you can pretty much generate and debug code very, very quickly, which means the barrier to entry is lower, which means you get results more quickly, and it can be very motivating.
I agree. Totally agree. So, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to yourself when you first started in this industry? This is a personal one.
What advice will I give? So, I'll give the advice that I give to, I mentor quite a few people, and the kind of advice I give to them is, and this is partly an ethnic problem. So people who are like me, of Indian origin, maybe of African origin, have always had this drilled into us that you need to work hard, you need to be technically proficient at the things that you're doing, and that's the most important thing. Your productivity as a effectively working machine in the cog of society is the most important thing. And I did this for 20 years, right? Worked long hours, worked hard, crawled over broken glass to get to the things that I wanted. And the thing that I was missing was the thing that I focused on for the last maybe 5 years. I wouldn't say focused on, but I brought it into my life, is the power of networking. Other people, making sure that you know people who can fill the gaps in what you do so that we all have a cohesive kind of society that is productive and it doesn't rely just on one person. So I think that would be the most important advice I would give to myself 20 years ago, because I was focusing on being technically able to do all the things, and I should have focused on network a lot earlier.
Noted, for me at least. So, if you could invite someone to this podcast to talk about the impact of artificial intelligence on trading as well, so we don't know about that, but if you could invite anybody else, who would it be and why?
So, that's a very good question.
Give us a referral.
Yeah. So, somebody dead or alive, I'm just going to go like the whole spectrum of if I had the ultimate wish. And I think I say this on nearly every one of my wish questions. I get these wish questions a lot, right? And it's going to be Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of Queen, right?
Yeah.
Now, the reason for that is, so I, as you know, and anybody who's been on a call with me, I play music. I have a wall of guitars in my office behind me. And over time, if I think back to when I started playing music, it was, the first time you pick up a guitar, I'm not playing solos at Wembley Stadium, right? The first time you pick it up, there's practice required. We have this expectation now with artificial intelligence that you don't need that. You just click a button, it all happens for you. You don't need to be good at it. It just happens. But over time, you go to a studio. We're in a studio right now. We're sitting, eye to eye. We have a microphone. We are recording things. But what happens to the signal? It goes somewhere. It gets processed somewhere. Now, in the old days, that would be to be a guy with a desk, twiddling some knobs and playing with some faders, and it would get recorded to a tape, and then it would have to be mastered, right? You need to take out all the unwanted frequencies and make sure that you're just getting the signal that you want. And musicians that have been through this process 30, 40, 50 years ago, nowadays you have sound replacement technologies, you have automatic or AI mastering, which takes out all the noise, takes out all the clicks, and just does it at the click of a button. And doing things at the click of a button means that everybody can kind of access these technologies and everybody can get to the same level of quality as people used to have to really spend a lot of money on a studio and an engineer and all of these things. And we're talking, in learning, we tend to be talking about media creation. So as somebody in the media creation business, somebody like Freddie Mercury, right, who's no longer with us, who has been absent from the world of technology for the last 20 years. I think he died in 91 or something like that, 92, 90, whatever it was. So having been absent from the world of technology for so long, and then looking at the capabilities that we have in front of us right now, having experienced at the highest level, being on stage, being in studios, recording things that were groundbreaking, having that gap, and now seeing what we can do now, I would just love to see his take. What does he think about all of this stuff? Would he be using Suno and going, you know what, I've just put in a prompt and I've generated a song. Isn't that amazing? Or would he be thinking, that's just garbage. There's no creativity in it, So it would be so interesting to hear his take.
This is actually a very, very interesting answer, and I completely agree. I was a musician as well, so yeah. I really get that. Well, before this is just the end, lightning round, okay? Very, very fast. AI or gamification?
AI.
Okay. Describe the corporate future in 3 words.
Dystopian. 1 word.
1 word, even better. Innovation. Take risks or be cautious?
Take risks.
Always. And gamification in training, competition or collaboration?
Competition.
Very good. Well, we're done. Thank you, Ashwin, for being here.
Thank you.
Before we close, do you want to ask me anything?
So, yes,
Okay.
I'd like your take on the future of... So, you asked me about the future of AI, or what I think it will be. For you, what's the future of game-based learning?
With artificial intelligence or in general?
In general.
I think artificial intelligence is going to play a huge role here. I think we are going to be more independent when learning. And I think we are going to try to be as simple as possible, because I feel like in the last few years, there have been many options there. And now what I can see is the tendency is trying to simplify things, but getting the best of the best. So I feel now is a time of researching, finding what is the best way for the employee, but also for you as a learning and development manager or as a corporation. And then with that, moving forward. I really believe in gamification. Obviously, I'm here because of this. And I really believe in new technologies and using them in the right way to make an impact on people in general, no matter where you are in the corporation. So to me, it's going to be more simple, more to the point, and very, very focused on the employee, I believe.
So that's technology-led gamification, but there's also the other side of it, which is focusing on play, right? And you get some of these executive sessions, usually because they're expensive, it goes to the executives, but where you have like maybe Lego blocks, or you have some crayons and you have like some paper, and everybody like draw a picture of your cat or something, but everybody's kind of networking and playing, and then eventually you have some productive activities and you get towards some kind of productive outcome, but everybody's playing. And part of the reason I asked that question is we do all focus on tech because tech is scalable. But there's still the other side of game-based learning, which is learning through play, learning through doing, being in a room, socio-constructivism, and, interacting with your peers in a way that it is facilitated by play to get an outcome. And I see that that's becoming scarce because it's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be less accessible in the future because it's so resource intensive. But what do you think?
This is a very tricky question. I don't know. I feel like I try to push for keeping this as it is because I like how gamification or playing by doing really helps. I do it myself, so I know how it works and I know the impact in other corporations. But I'm also very eager to introduce new stuff. And to me, I'm not an expert on techie things. So to me, it's very difficult to see how everything is going to click. My wish is that everything clicks. So we don't forget about the, the personal, the eye to eye, like the feelings, the passion. But at the same time, I really want to use these new emerging technologies in a good way that we can put everything together, as you mentioned before, like the good things we do as humans, but also the good things technology brings to us. So what's the future? To be honest, I don't know. That's why you're here. You have to tell me.
I mean, it touches on a bunch of other things, right? Because what you're saying is that our ability to scale things through artificial intelligence means that human-to-human interactions become more scarce, human-to-machine interactions become more available, more accessible. So we have a potential future where we're going to be playing with another person that's not a person. We're going to be playing with an agent, with an avatar, with a digital likeness of a person on a screen, which is great. And does it solve the issues of learning? Because we have population dynamics to think about as well. But it does allow access to information. But it also allows potentially combating things like loneliness in the population, where people don't have interactions with other people. They now can have interactions with a machine. You could be thinking about how you support the elderly with things that otherwise they wouldn't have access to any people around them that can advise them on things. So you've got lots of societal impact that could come from this, and it's not just about how we leverage mechanics in corporations, because you could have game-based learning, you could have artificial intelligence in pretty much any sector of society. So it's a vast and interesting world for both of us.
No, totally. Let's see what the future brings. So again, a pleasure to talk to you, Ashwin. Thank you so much. We're done today. And for all our subscribers and people who is following us, thank you for joining us today as well. If you like it, you can share this episode with your colleagues or your friends, but you can also subscribe to follow us on our next episode. See you very soon. Thank you so much.